warm welcome to Federal Special Program Capital Beat. President Donald Trump cut short his trip to Canada for a meeting with world leaders and took off for Washington. Now, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that it was due to what's going on in the Middle East. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron, while speaking to the reporters, said that Trump was trying for a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. But Trump, being Donald Trump, he condemned what Emmanuel Macron said on Truth Social, almost castigating Macron being publicity hungry. And US President hinted at something bigger. Now, what is that big plan which is being cooked up in White House? No one knows. So, is US joining Israel in the war? Can US force Iran to surrender? What could be the possibilities as far as the Iran and Israel war is concerned? Joining me now is Ambassador Meera Shankar. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining. We have Professor Swaran Singh, who's an international affairs expert, who's been a professor with JNU. Thank you so much for joining. We have Sanjay Kapoor, international affairs expert and author. Thank you so much, Sanjay. And we have Pushparaj Deshpande, who's the author of the book called Bharat Jodo Yatra and also works closely with the India Alliance and follows diplomacy as well. Thank you so much, Pushparaj. And I'll begin with Ambassador Meera Shankar. Ambassador, what is your sense? What caused Donald Trump to cut short his visit? And is it something really regarding what's happening in the Middle East, as it was pointed out by the White House spokesperson?
Yes, I think the situation there is very tense because Israel has warned people to evacuate Tehran, and Donald Trump has repeated that. He has repeated the warning, saying that, we will come down so hard, and also saying that Iran should have taken the deal, that he had offered, but they didn't. And so we really don't know whether he has given up for the moment, trying to broker some kind of ceasefire. I think he's not looking at that. He is looking at a final deal in the sense that he would like Iran to actually agree to what the US had put on the table, which was that, Iran would give up its nuclear option, would give up enriching uranium beyond the threshold which had been agreed with the IAEA in the past, and also that it would, get its fuel, enriched fuel for its centrifuges from outside, that it would not create its own feedstock, which it does, so this was something that Iran was not willing to accept, saying that they are not pursuing a nuclear weapon, but they cannot give up their right to nuclear energy for civilian purposes. So they were going to come up with an alternative proposal of their own, and that's when Israel struck, before the next round of talks, which was scheduled for 16th June. Now, you can see Mr. Trump, President Trump, wavering back and forth because his own constituency is split. You have one lot of MAGA, Trump, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are opposed to Israel's action in Iran, and they apprehend that this would drag the US into another war of its own, not of its own making, in the Middle East. Then there is the other wing, Lindsey Graham and company, who say, well, go all out. And go all out and back Israel. So Trump has been veering between the two, initially pushing for a deal and saying it appeared that a good deal might be possible, then saying it's quite far, and then now fully backing Israel and warning people in Tehran to evacuate. Now, the Israelis would need US help to actually attack some of the Iranian nuclear sites. They have attacked the, uh, they have attacked the uranium enrichment facilities and the centrifuges at Natanz, but their main military site is Fordo, where the equipment is buried. It's in a mountain, so it would require bunker buster bombs from the United States. And the way Trump is talking, it looks as though he might be ready to transfer bunker buster bombs to Israel to enable them to bomb Fordo. But you can't say, because he's been going back and forth. You can't say. It may well be also that the Iranians are signaling that they are willing to accept the US nuclear deal. So we really don't know what it is. But clearly, Israel has upped the ante, thwarted the possibility of a peace deal by its strikes. And now, of course, everybody in the world is concerned about the possibility of an expanding conflict in the region.
Right. So you were saying that there is a possibility of this attack conflict expanding. I'll come to you, Professor Swaran Singh. What is your sense as to what's really happening? And now what Emmanuel Macron pointed out, that there could be a ceasefire, but does a ceasefire look like a possibility, or maybe a bigger showdown, is what Ambassador Shankar pointed out?
Clearly, Neelu, the president himself has clarified that question, that he is not anymore looking at ceasefire, that there is going to be something bigger. And in his typical style, he admonished President Macron as publicity seeker. But if there has to be within this wavering of Donald Trump some method to madness, I think there is a very clear contention given his experience during the first term in White House and experience in Afghanistan, that he indicated reluctance to put boots on the ground in any next conflict, that he will use only technology denials, sanctions regimes, tariff hikes, and so on, to use that maximum pressure to have his way of doing things. Now, whether he's going to deviate from there at this stage looks difficult. Second, at the same time, if you saw the way he abruptly left after dinner, midnight of Monday, to go home, saying that there is something bigger he wants to do, and then, of course, he wrote his comment on social media while on flight on way to home, saying that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. And we now know that the joint statement, which was hurriedly put together because President Trump was to leave early, the first draft, which talked of de-escalation between Iran and Israel, was not acceptable. And the revised draft really added that same sentiment, that Pakistan is the one to blame, is responsible for regional instability and terror and so on, and also that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Now, that's an academic debate as to whether Israel can have and Iran cannot have, but at this stage, then, what are the likelihoods of, on way back, as Fox News has confirmed, him calling his national security team to be at White House Situation Room when he lands back at White House? So, what is the big decree or decision is he likely to take? As Ambassador Mira Shankar mentioned, he could enable Israel and then provide Israel much more dangerous kind of military equipment, including bunker busters and so on. Indirectly, US, of course, has been helping Israel even in these last 5 days of strikes in all kinds of information, intelligence, targeting, and so on. But whether apparently more visibly he's going to do something. Second thing that he potentially could do is to do force posturing, projecting in terms of deployment of his military assets in the name of protecting American citizens in the region, which of course remains concern. He's mentioned it before that American assets and personnel, about 40,000 plus forces are in Gulf region of America. they are out of bounds, and Iran should not even think of hitting any of these. But if you look at the way Iran has also, been known for having proxies, and whether proxies are in complete direct control of Tehran right now, any freak incident could complicate things. But at this stage, I'm not very clear whether Trump is going to create any kind of direct participation. Of course, Channel 14 of Tel Aviv has already announced that he's going to directly join us, and he's passing the degree that he's ordering deployments and so on. But I'm not sure if America is really going to do that. And Meera Shankar just mentioned about the split within the Republican Party. So there are voices on both sides. It's not an uproar for America to go and jump on the bandwagon with Netanyahu. The two parties, Iran and Israel, Israel is led by a single man, Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is in no mood for any negotiations. He's talking of expanding the war further. Iranian foreign minister has sent feelers of likelihood of accepting negotiations, but he's also put very clear conditions. A, that this will happen only after Iran has satisfactorily done retaliation. And second, more important, that their nuclear program is not on the table for discussion. So that again looks like a non-starter. So I don't see any ceasefire happening, and I think that is already clarified by President Trump. But whether he is going to really up the ante in
Right.
escalating in terms of force projections, I think that is likely to happen within next few hours.
Right. So next few hours, of course, are very, very crucial. And what I'm reading on the X, which was formerly Twitter, Sanjay, I'm coming to you that there's an Israeli channel 14 which is reporting that Trump is expected to sign an order within hours to formally enter the Israel-Iran war. Now, these reports also suggest that US may have already begun the strikes on Tehran. Aircraft carriers, jets, troop movement. This, of course, doesn't look like posturing. Does it not look like positioning then? If at all this Channel 14, what it's reporting is true. Yes, Sanjay.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you that it's really frightening whatever is being stated by Channel 14 and the Israeli website, because in my reckoning, whatever being stated by Mr. Trump had been agreed to by Iran to quite some extent. They were willing to sign when the discussion was going on. And in fact, they were on the threshold of signing this entire deal with the US. And it was Israel that decided to sabotage it. Bibi Netanyahu did not want any kind of agreement with Iran for that matter. And that is the reason why it just decided to escalate. So, how will Mr. Donald Trump get Iran back onto doing the same thing and satisfy Israel at the same time? We're not very sure of that, because is the more what Mr. Trump is trying to do, even with these kind of reports which are coming out in the Israeli media that he's on the threshold of signing a deal, it's signing an order where there would be bombing of Iran and all kinds of things, and bunker buster bombs are going to go up. All that is meant to satisfy one man who I think is having greater say and greater control over American politics than Mr. Trump himself, and that is Mr. Bibi Netanyahu. And how he'll satisfy him is something that still has to be tested. But US, especially Donald Trump, does not want to sully his image as somebody who's a guy who provokes war, because his entire strategy, entire politics has been around this fact that he is anti-war and he could manipulate circumstances and try to show that he can bring the warring armies to put their weapons inside, like it did with India. In fact, he has claimed and not been disputed very categorically by India so much that he managed to broker peace between India and Pakistan. He wants the same impression to continue. In fact, he's been selling this time and again that what he did with India, he'll do with Iran and Israel. But at the moment, it's not happening. It's a different ball game altogether that we are witnessing. So let's keep our fingers crossed that in the next few hours, Iran doesn't blow up, because when he gives a call on his social media platform called Truth that Iranians should vacate Tehran, It's not something which is very easy. It's a city of about 10 million people, almost a crore reside in that old city. When you say that they should leave, you one doesn't know the implication. It's like crazy. It will cause panic, and more people die just trying to get out of the city before even the bombs start coming in. So it's a very dangerous situation, and I think the not just Iran and Israel, rest of the world is also sitting on the edge.
So clearly, the things are on the edge. Pushpaj, I'll come to you now and speak to you about this Netanyahu's interview to Fox News, which has created further ripples and added further complications to it. He talks about a plot where Ayatollah Khomeini is probably will be murdered. Before this, even Trump had corroborated that that there was a plan like that from Israel's end, and it was at his behest that plot was uh, postponed or whatever. But again, now Netanyahu talking about it, has it really complicated the things for the current regime in Iran? Or do you think that Iran will put up a brave show and they will come out clean? Because this wasn't clearly a war where Israel, if nobody thought that Israel would look so weak, but Iran, uh, all said and done, has put up a brave fight, and they've shown what they can mean to countries like Israel.
Hi, Niluji. Good afternoon to you, our panelists, and our viewers. See, you're right. Firstly, Israel is trying to bait the United States into joining its war against Iran. Not just Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also the former defense minister, a bunch of other neocons from the Likud party, and other and former PMs also are aggressively trying to get the United States involved against Iran. Now, as our esteemed ambassador has already mentioned, this is politically risky for President Trump for various reasons. One is the MAGA coalition will split, as she rightly pointed out. Already, his former NSA Steve Bannon, along with his core cheerleaders Marjorie Greene, Tucker Carlson, Matt Gaetz, and others, are saying that President Trump should not get drawn into yet another war in the Middle East. Now, this is a valid concern for two reasons. One, the US has sunk nearly $12 trillion in wars in that region since 2003. Plus, if the US does join this war against Iran, Iran could very well attack the 40,000 plus troops in Qatar, UAE, and the entire Persian Gulf. Now, that obviously means a higher body count, more body bags, and that is something that most rational politicians, I want to use the word, operative word here is rational politicians would want to avoid. Um, Conversely, apart from the military industrial complex, neocons like the former NSA General Flynn in America, they are arguing that finishing the Iran problem would help US refocus its energies on China. Similarly, the entire Democratic Party is inexplicably silent on this war. I mean, we know why they're silent, but it is. And that is why the USS Nimitz streaming towards the Persian Gulf is a powder keg. I mean, it could be old fashioned gunboat diplomacy, but it could also be a sacrificial lamb. Secondly, I find this a bit strange. This entire argument that the West is proffering, I find this a bit strange because Israel started attacking Iran on an illegal preemptive, not preventive war, as they are claiming. Now, in international law, to the best of my knowledge, Iran, which is a signatory of the NPT and allows IEAA inspectors, can enrich uranium for civilian purposes, which is what it is doing. The IEEA report, the latest report, while it does flag some problems with its compliance, Iran's compliance, both the IEEA report and NIA Tulsi Gabbard have publicly said that Iran is nowhere close to creating a bomb. Now, this is not ground for Israel starting a war because there is no credible or imminent threat. Now, I genuinely, like I've said in a previous show, this is like 2003 all over again, where Israel, UK, US claimed that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. No weapon was found. The region was destabilized, and this led to the creation of Al Qaeda and eventually ISIS, which led to enhanced terror across the world. Now, the hypocrisy of the political class, not the West, the political class in the West is appalling. Germany condemned Iran way before it ever fired the first missile in retaliations to Israel attack. Now, similarly, most governments are refusing to condemn Israel for what's happened in Gaza, or what's happened and happening. Even now, they're attacking people. Yesterday, 69 people died in Gaza. Plus, the G7 yesterday put out a statement saying that Israel has a right to defend itself, which it does, but does not say anything about Iran's right to defend itself. In fact, it went on to say that Iran is the source of terrorism in the Middle East. Now, in all these cases, in all these examples, the political class is out of touch with the people of their nations. And I have a feeling that this will lead to a further disillusionment with establishment parties. And ironically, it will lead to a bigger upsurge of the right and populist autocrats. So I'll come to that in a bit. Thirdly, a continued war with Iran would be geopolitically and economically catastrophic. If Israel hits Kharg Island or Bandar Abbas terminals in Iran, Iran could close the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, already I've been seeing reports in the Iranian media that the IRGC and the Houthis in Yemen are agreeing to close the Straits of Hormuz and Ban al Mandeb in Red Sea. That could collectively adverse impact almost 20% of the world's oil supply, not to mention shipping routes. On the other hand, Iran it has escalated this war by hitting Mossad's headquarters in Glilot in North Tel Aviv. Now, the point is that this war is stretching traditional alliances and understandings to their limit. I have a sneaking suspicion that China feels, and rightly so, that the secondary purpose of regime change threats in Iran is to constrain Iranian oil supply to them. It has already started putting out public statements condemning Israel and calling upon US to exercise restraint. Now, obviously, Iran doesn't trust US or the West because, frankly, this lack of spine from the other nations or even so-called progressive parties is leading to the parceling of the world in power blocks. I genuinely feel that eventually the spillover effect of this is going to be like the Munich conference that carved out Czechoslovakia. Decisions about Ukraine, Palestine, Yemen, and other such conflict zones are going to be made by great powers. I mean, this is moving further away from multipolarity, and this actually is detrimental to India's self-interest.
Absolutely. In fact, I'll come to the Indian interest, but this regime change point which you raised, Pushparaj, I'll come to Ambassador Meera Shankar. How credible do these reports hold, ma'am, regarding the regime change in Iran? That there are certain forces, or maybe the deep state is very active. They want Ayatollah Khomeini's regime to be changed. There could be a coup. Amidst all these reports, how much of credence can you give to these reports?
Well, I think the Israelis have made no bones about the fact that they are seeking regime change in Iran for quite some time. At the UN, they have spoken,
Yes.
asking the Iranian people to rise and overthrow the regime. So it's quite clear that the Israelis have been working to a plan to see if they can engineer enough opposition or enough stress within the system in Iran for people to actually seek to overthrow the regime.
Yeah, sorry to just allow me to interrupt you for a few seconds. Ambassador Shankar, sorry I interrupted you. But despite all the efforts of Israel, now they've gone to the extent of Netanyahu talking openly on interviews about plotting a murder of Ayatollah Khomeini's murder.
Yes. And of course, President Trump saying, I told them to hold off on it.
Yes.
So it's really actually legitimizing once again the kind of actions which the resistance to the Vietnam War in America had delegitimized. After that, there was some effort to bring a greater degree of accountability to the intelligence agencies and operatives in the United States with congressional oversight. And they didn't talk of assassinations and so on, though they always probably engaged in it, particularly through their partners such as Israel or UK, which didn't have similar constraints. So now what we are seeing is that this is once again being legitimized as an instrument of state policy. I think it's a very major backward step for the world. And of course, now I'm sure that President Khamenei has also gone into hiding somewhere, because initially the Iranians didn't appear to expect an attack till the next round of talks with the US was over, because they were engaged in discussions And the US had been signaling that there's not likely to be any attack as long as talks are going on. And so they were caught unawares, they were caught by surprise. And a large number of military commanders and generals and engineers from their nuclear program were assassinated by Israel on the first day. After that, they have also killed the person in Khamenei's office who was the political aide who was overseeing the talks with the United States. And so, it's something which is actually very scary because, it means that nothing is off the cards anymore.
Right.
That countries can pursue legitimate or illegitimate interests with
Absolutely.
no holds barred.
Right. No, I mean, absolutely. And the situation indeed is very scary. But Professor Swaran Singh, I'll come to you now. What kind of options does Washington really have? Now, I was reading somewhere that the American defense analysts, including their former intelligence officers and army officers, they have already berated Netanyahu for seeking to involve US in this whole thing. And the kind of money which Washington has already spent, about $12 trillion they've spent in the Middle East since 2003. Do you think that Donald Trump will really, where he's talking about saving money, where he's talking about the American interest, would he go that far to involve America now in war with Israel?
Military option, given the prowess that United States has at its disposal, both in terms of its armed forces and its defense exports, can often and has always been very tempting option for successive American presidents. But we have also noticed that in case of Netanyahu, whether it is President Joe Biden's time or it is now during Trump era, he has been able to defy United States constantly. And therefore, it looks like even with military option on the table, whether United States will be able to restrain any kind of sort of behavior out of Prime Minister Netanyahu. That to me looks difficult, and therefore that doesn't serve American purpose even by using military option, which itself is complicated. Anywhere United States has sent its armed forces in last 90 years, they have created bigger chaos than existed before they walked in there. And invariably, United States has suffered not just financially and in terms of body bags coming home, but also in terms of its prestige, except that it is able to control the narrative and deflect public opinion attention from Afghanistan to Ukraine to Israel and now to Iran. That is how it works. But it looks like, in terms of American options, using military, working on its own is not going to be very effective. So I think G7 summit meeting was an excellent opportunity to bring together the powerful nations, not just the seven G7, but the seven other who are going to join the outreach summit, who are joining the outreach summits. That is where I think certain possibility, and then taking it to United Nations Security Council or General Assembly, is how one can bring to bear certain amount of pressure on both Iran and Israel. But I agree with Ambassador Meera Shankar, the language which is being permitted today, the kind of actions that are being legitimized, the kind of extent of collateral damage that has become kind of the new normal, is not going to simply impact Middle East. It's going to impact all of us around the world, and therefore it is setting new standards. Are we going to see more authoritarian, more dictatorial, more megalomaniac kind of characters being unleashed on world politics with no restrictions whatsoever in that sense? So both in short term and long term, if US has to sustain a certain amount of slowing down, slow decline, shall we say, of its global leadership, I think it has to focus not just on immediate allies who are no longer listening, but also focus on not really annoying and alienating the other alliances that have really ensured American leadership around the world, pushing them around to, forcing them to dictate what kind of joint statement will come out, which will be supporting only one side in a conflict, and at the same time talking of doing mediation. It defies any logic, absolutely. And in that sense, if United States is behaving the way it is, uh, not just Iran, I think no one can anticipate a agreeable mediation coming from United States on that subject anymore. So in that sense, I think we are going to continuously see this kind of muddling through of multiple possibilities where Trump will continue to waver from one side to the other side, and destruction will continue. And last very quick point, I think a lot of people today also believe, given the disruption that multiple fronts opening by Netanyahu has created within his domestic politics, even within his own party, it's likely that Prime Minister Netanyahu sees his political career coinciding with continuation of wars. And in that sense, the most potent strategy that Jews, I'm saying Jews, not Israel, because I'm going back to history even before Israel was created, assassinations have been very effective tool that they have always used. And in case they are able to enter the political domain in impacting that kind of assassinations in Iran, things could perhaps go relatively out of hand. But whether it can do regime change minus that or even with that looks difficult, because people in Iran, particularly when it comes to following or towing Israeli line, are not likely to do that. And I think we will see that the regime in Iran has a certain amount of domestic support as it appears. And regime change, I think, is also a bit out of fashion after Taliban did regime change in reverse on the United States several years ago, 6 years ago. So regime change, I think, is less of a possibility now. There was an era when those things happened. I don't see that even with the political assassinations, that kind of thing happening. But of course, Iran is taking all the caution. And I believe that after initial hit of all the top military leaders being sort of eliminated, Iran has taken substantial care that political leaders are not impacted by this assassination strategy by Israel. So
Right.
the violence will continue for some time. I think that is how it is, and posturing will happen. I don't think a sudden explosive change in situation is going to happen within the next few hours.
Right. So, I would definitely want to discuss also the learning lessons for the Indian diplomacy in this episode. I'll come to Pushpraj on that. But Sanjay, I want to come to you on another bit. That is Donald Trump taking too much of a risk by doing this? Because there was a data which was put out by a former U.S. Army officer, Douglas McGregor, and he's written out as a tweet saying that 77 million Americans voted for President Trump because he promised to end the overseas conflicts and halt the march to World War III. Now, the kind of scenario which is evolving, uh, do you think that Donald Trump really can take that kind of a risk by involving America in a war? Or he will try and see how he can balance out the situation and somehow not allow the things to escalate? Yes, Sanjay. Yes. You're not audible, Sanjay. I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we are discussing at the moment is also feeding rumors and conspiracy theories back in the US. Primarily, people think that you have the deep state, which is impacting the decision making there. They think that uh, Mr. Trump is worried by the threat of impeachment, which so-called Israeli lobby has been able to initiate, which is compelling Mr. Trump to somehow uh, make Iran, go on his knees and ask for forgiveness and somehow do whatever the Americans or in the process the Israelis want. So that is something that we don't really know of, but deep state is what people are keep talking about it. Primarily because if you see evidence, you had the issue of the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, writing about 90 days ago about how what exactly she means that Iran doesn't have a bomb, and also suggesting that there is no reason for it to go to war. So there are multiple layers which in which Mr. Trump is operating. It's not a very happy situation. He's trying to see whether he can mollify, he can buy Mr. Netanyahu from putting more pressure and creating domestic hurdles for Mr. Trump. He knows that things could get really out of control if he's not able to handle Mr. Trump. And similarly, he has a large group of Republicans, as been mentioned by fellow panelists, who have been running a campaign to stop Israel, like Carlson and others who have great amount of influence in the Republican Party. So there are multiple
Right. So I think I've lost your audio, Sanjay. But to the last bit, Pushpraj, I'll come to you. I was looking at what Jairam Ramesh again tweeted, and he said that President Trump has left the G7 summit a day before the G7 outreach with 8 other countries. That includes India. Begins, and this is the setback for self-styled Vishuguru's huglomacy. Now, what I want to, in reference to this tweet put out by Jairam Ramesh, of course, what are the big learning lessons for Indian diplomacy and the way India is engaging with countries like America, like Israel?
Hi, Niluji. One quick comment. I cannot help but recall South Africa's apartheid regime. And there are some stark parallels between South Africa's apartheid regime and Israel. In its final days, the apartheid regime also had tried to effect a regime change in Angola. They had installed a puppet regime in Namibia. They had attacked Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Botswana. And just to prop up its own government survival, like Professor Singh was saying, now, isn't Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party also doing the same thing? I genuinely doubt. I mean, it didn't work then, and I don't think it will work. I doubt it will work today because there are progressive Jews and Israelis who will reject hawkish and regressive politics. But coming back to India, this is extremely problematic for various reasons. In blindly extending support for Israel's aggression and tacitly endorsing the argument that powerful nations can have regional spheres of influence. This is a very slippery ground. Indian foreign policy has traditionally adhered to the norm that we do not believe in the application of primordial rules of statecraft to redraw either national boundaries or external interference to effect regime change or even the use of violence in geopolitics and foreign policy. Now, if we cede any of these arguments, how can we expect the world to support us against China's aggression in Ladakh and Arunachal? I mean, even though the BJP claims no one ever came there, but how do we expect them to stand against China's aggression? Even China can have a sphere of influence, or even in our own neighborhood. Now, that is one part of the argument. The other part of the argument is that time and again, with this abstention in the UN vote and in the Shanghai Cooperation also, what in a sense neutrality is not neutrality is complicity. And every time we are tacitly endorsing Israel, which is a reversal to what our original stance has been. Every time we do that, the Modi government weakens our case on Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Like Israel is occupying Gaza, Pakistan is also illegally occupying a part of Kashmir. Why would we compromise our own national self-interest? That is one part. The other thing is that I'm not understanding why under this government the Prime Minister's office, the EAM, the External Affairs Minister, and the NSA, Ajit Doval, why they are so hell bent on kowtowing to what the US dictates. We have completely abdicated our self-interest and our national, in independent foreign policy and outsource it to the US. US says that we're going to slap tariffs on you. We drop the BRICS currency idea. US says, I mean, they are asking us to support Israel versus Palestine. We're blindly doing that. There are many other things that are happening. That have happened in the last few months. They are asking us to do something in Quad. Fine, that is a slightly complicated argument, but we don't seem to be pursuing an independent foreign policy that is conducive to maximizing our national self-interest. In fact, I would go so far to say that they are compromising our national interest. Now, given this, the ambassador here would vouch for this, but there are many fine officers in the foreign services who can pursue and stridently defend India's case. I mean, we have some of the best diplomats in the world. We are very small, no doubt, and there is a case to be made to expand the foreign services. But to completely handcuff them and not allow them to pursue our self-interest is not in the national interest. In fact, it could be so far, we could go so far to call this seditious. Why is the government not doing this? And I think that the India parties and the Congress party in this monsoon session of parliament need to ask these questions and need to pose an alternative foreign policy blueprint to the nation. Because what the government is doing today in the last 11 years, they have left us alienated and isolated globally. The neighborhood, our neighborhood is completely alienated from us. We don't have any equitable relationship with either Russia or China or even the United States. I mean, this is not at all a happy situation for India to be in today. And this is think about it. In 2013, 2014, the world was feting us as a democratic counter to China. I mean, I remember articles in the Economist and elsewhere saying that we are the rising power, the elephant versus the dragon, and so on and so forth. Today, we are being compared and we are hyphenated with Pakistan, which is a failing and a flailing state.
Not many challenges over there, and Donald Trump's early exit from G7 summit rather has left many leaders in the lurch. Just wanting to remind the viewers before we end the program that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky was waiting to meet Trump. Then you have the South Korean President Lee Jae-myung waiting to meet Trump. Then you had Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum was also waiting to meet Trump. All these leaders are now left in the lurch, and we'll have to wait and watch what developments happen in the White House. Maybe some overnight developments, and by morning, who knows, the headlines might change to something else. It was wonderful to have all of you on the program. Thank you, Ambassador Shankar, Swaran Singh, Sanjay, Pushparaj. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.